I never imagined that one day my own daughter would stand in front of me and scream those words, "You're a burden, just leave." And she said it right there at the dinner table, in the house I had spent my entire life building. What she didn't know was that after that night, everything in her life was about to change. My name is Margaret. I'm 64 years old, and until recently, I believed family was the one thing you could always count on. But that belief shattered on a quiet Sunday evening. It started like any other dinner. I was in the kitchen finishing the meal I had been preparing all afternoon: roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, and mashed potatoes, Linda's favorite since she was a little girl. I had always loved cooking for my family. Even now, after so many years, it made me feel needed. The house we lived in wasn't just a building. My late husband and I had built it together from the ground up. Every wall, every window, every piece of furniture carried memories of the life we had worked so hard to create. After my husband passed away 8 years ago, the house felt much larger and much quieter. Then, 3 years ago, my daughter Linda and her husband Mark moved in. Mark had lost his job and they were struggling financially. When Linda called me crying one night, I didn't hesitate. "Come stay with me," I told her. "This house is your home too." I never asked them to pay rent. I cooked their meals, helped with the kids, and did everything I could to make their lives easier. At the time, I believed that was what family was supposed to do. That evening, Linda had suggested we all sit down for dinner together. Mark came home early from work and their 2 children were upstairs playing in their room. I placed the dishes on the table and called everyone to eat. At first, everything felt normal. Mark talked about a new project at work. Linda scrolled through her phone, barely looking up, but something about the atmosphere felt strange. Linda kept glancing at me, like she was building up the courage to say something. Finally, she placed her fork on the table. "Mom, we need to talk." I smiled politely. "Of course, what's wrong?" But Linda didn't smile back. Mark suddenly became very quiet. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Linda took a deep breath. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "We think it's time for you to move out." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. "I'm sorry, what?" Linda's voice grew sharper. "You heard me. This arrangement isn't working anymore." I stared at her in disbelief. "Linda, this is my house." She rolled her eyes. "Mom, please. You're always in the kitchen, always around the kids, always telling us how things should be done." Her words felt like small knives. "I'm just helping," I said quietly. Linda suddenly pushed her chair back and stood up. Her voice rose, loud and angry. "You're not helping. You're a burden." The room went completely silent. Even the sounds upstairs stopped. My heart felt like it had dropped into my stomach. "Linda, how can you say that?" But she didn't stop. "You're a burden," she shouted again. "Just leave." Mark sat there silently, staring down at his plate. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a single word. That hurt almost as much as Linda's words. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I slowly stood up from the table. I looked around the dining room, the same room where Linda had celebrated birthdays as a child, where we had shared so many happy moments as a family. Then I looked back at my daughter. "This house," I said quietly, "was built by your father and me." Linda let out a short laugh. "Mom, that was a long time ago." For the first time that evening, Mark finally spoke. "Linda's right. We need our space." Those words felt like a door slamming shut. The 2 people I had supported when they needed help the most were now telling me I didn't belong in my own home. I gently pushed my chair back and walked towards the front door. Probably Linda expected me to cry and lock myself in my bedroom, but something inside me had changed. Before stepping outside, I turned back one last time. If I'm really such a burden, then maybe leaving is the best thing I can do. I opened the door, but remember something, I added. Sometimes people don't realize what they've lost until it's too late. Then I walked out into the cold night. The air was quiet and still. I sat inside my car staring at the house where I had spent most of my life. For the first time, I asked myself a painful question. Did I really have no place there anymore? But then something else crossed my mind. A secret, something Linda and Mark didn't know, something that would change everything once they discovered it. And when they did, they might regret ever asking me to leave. That night, I didn't drive far. I parked my car a few blocks away from the house and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared, but because I was trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Just a few hours earlier, I had been cooking dinner for my family. Now my own daughter had called me a burden and told me to leave the house I had built with my husband. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, I thought about driving somewhere far away, maybe staying in a cheap motel for the night. But then something else came to my mind, something Linda and Mark had completely forgotten, or maybe they had never known in the first place. You see, after my husband passed away 8 years ago, I had learned something important about life. People change. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the most. That's why, a year after Daniel died, I met with a lawyer. At the time, it was just supposed to be a simple conversation about protecting my finances. But that meeting turned out to be one of the most important decisions of my life. I started the car and drove across town. Within 15 minutes, I was parked outside a small office building. The sign on the door read, "Thompson and Baker Law Firm." The lights inside were still on. Mr. Thompson had told me years ago that if I ever needed help, I could come by any time. I walked inside slowly. He looked up from his desk and immediately recognized me. "Margaret," he said, surprised. "Is everything all right?" I sat down in the chair across from him. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I told him everything. About the dinner, about Linda's words, about being told to leave my own home. Mr. Thompson listened carefully without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Well," he said calmly, "I had a feeling something like this might happen one day." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He opened a file cabinet and pulled out a folder. Then he placed it on the desk between us. Inside were documents I had signed years ago, the property papers for the house. But there was something else attached to them, a legal agreement. Mr. Thompson tapped the document gently. "Technically speaking," he said, "your daughter and her husband don't own anything in that house." I blinked. "They've been living there for 3 years," I said quietly. "Yes," he replied, "but the house is still entirely under your name." He paused before adding something that made my heart beat faster. "And according to the agreement you signed, you have full legal authority to remove anyone living there at any time." For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then I slowly nodded. "So, they told me to leave my own house?" Mr. Thompson gave a small smile. "Legally speaking, Margaret, they're the ones who should be worried." For the first time since dinner, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not revenge, but clarity. For years, I had tried to help my daughter. I had sacrificed my comfort, my money, and my peace just to make her life easier. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing me as her mother. Instead, she saw me as an obstacle, a burden. Mr. Thompson closed the folder and slid it toward me. "If you want," he said carefully, "we can start the eviction process tomorrow morning." The word eviction sounded strange in my ears. Evict my own daughter. But then Linda's voice echoed in my mind again. "You're a burden. Just leave." I picked up the folder and looked at the documents. Everything was clear. Everything was legal. I stood up slowly. "Let's start the process," I said. Mr. Thompson nodded. "All right, I'll have the paperwork ready first thing in the morning." I thanked him and walked back outside. The night air felt colder now, but for the first time in hours, I didn't feel lost. Instead, I felt calm, because the truth was about to come out, and when Linda and Mark realized what they had done, their reaction would be something they would never forget. The next morning, I didn't return to the house. Instead, I stayed at a small hotel nearby. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Linda. Her voice sounded irritated. "Mom, where are you?" I stayed silent for a moment before answering. "Why does it matter?" She sighed impatiently. "Because you left all your things here. When are you coming to get them?" I almost laughed. She still thought I was the one leaving. "You'll find out soon enough," I said calmly. Then I hung up. 2 hours later, Mr. Thompson called. "The notice has been delivered." I looked out the hotel window as he continued speaking. "They have 30 days to leave the property." 30 days. After everything that had happened, it seemed almost generous. I imagined Linda opening the envelope, reading the official letter, realizing that the house she believed was hers never actually belonged to her. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to breathe. Because the moment my daughter called me a burden, she had no idea she was about to lose the very roof over her head. And when she finally understood the truth, she would realize something she should have remembered from the beginning. The house was never hers. It never had been. And now, she would have to leave it behind. Around noon that day, my phone started ringing nonstop. The same name kept flashing on the screen. Linda. I knew exactly why. By now she had opened the envelope, the legal notice, the one that would finally show her the truth. I ignored the first few calls, but when the ringing didn't stop, I finally answered. "Mom, what is this?" Linda's voice was filled with panic and anger. I spoke calmly. "What happened?" "This notice just arrived," she shouted. "It says we have to leave the house. Is this some kind of joke?" I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I said softly, "It's not a joke, Linda." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then she said angrily, "But this is our house." For the first time, I interrupted her. "No." My voice was steady. "It's my house. It has always been my house." She didn't speak for several seconds. Then she said in disbelief, "So you're just going to throw us out on the street? We're your family." Her words hurt, but something inside me had already changed. And then I remembered what she had said that night. "You're a burden. Just leave." I spoke quietly. "In that same house, you called me a burden in front of your guests." The silence that followed felt heavy. After a moment, her voice softened. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that." But this time, I stopped her. "You said it." My voice carried both sadness and strength. And words don't disappear once they're spoken, Linda. A moment later, Mark's voice came onto the phone. "Margaret, we need to talk. We're family." I took a deep breath. "You've been given 30 days. Then I hung up. The next few days were strange. Linda called again and again, sometimes angry, sometimes crying, sometimes apologizing. But I had already made my decision. For years I had protected my daughter from every hardship. Maybe that was exactly why she had forgotten the value of things. 2 weeks later, I returned to the house for the first time. As soon as I opened the door, I felt the difference. The house was quiet. This was the same place that used to be full of laughter. Linda was sitting on the couch. Her eyes were swollen, as if she hadn't slept for days. When she saw me, she stood up slowly. "Mom," her voice was trembling. "I made a mistake." I looked at her silently. She walked closer. "I thought you would always be here for us. I never imagined you would actually leave." I spoke gently. "And you never imagined how it would feel to hear your own daughter call you a burden." Tears began running down her face. "Please forgive me." I didn't answer right away. For a moment, we just stood there. Then I looked around the house, the walls, the windows, the place where I had spent most of my life. Finally, I spoke. "I'm not going to throw you out onto the street." Linda looked up in surprise. "But it's time for you to build your own life." Mark had walked into the room by then. I looked at both of them. "You still have 30 days. Use that time to find another place." Linda slowly nodded. She understood that this time I wasn't going to change my mind. 1 month later, a moving truck was parked outside the house. Linda and Mark were loading their belongings. Linda walked up to me. There was regret in her eyes. "Mom, I hope one day you'll forgive me." I gently placed my hand on her head. "I already have." She looked surprised. Then I said quietly, "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." She lowered her eyes. A few minutes later, she got into the car. The truck slowly drove away down the street. I stood at the door watching until it disappeared. The house was quiet now, but in that silence there was peace. I walked inside and sat down on the couch, and for the first time I truly realized something. I wasn't a burden. I had never been a burden. I was simply a mother who finally remembered that respect should always come before love.